So I thought I'd do a video at this time of year to talk about seasonality in horse racing. Sounds a bit dull, but it will give you some guidance in terms of where you are within the year, where to set your expectations, and what you can do about it. So the thing is that all sports have some level of seasonality within them. So when you look at football, obviously it runs from August in the UK, we're talking about specifically here. It runs from August all the way round until May. The tennis season starts in Australia in January and then runs through to the World Tour finals in November. So every sport sort of has a start and finish, and there are cycles within there, because obviously in football, when the season starts, things are slightly random. Then we have the transfer window and managers getting sacked at Christmas. Then we have the FA Cup coming along in January, and then we have the relegation and championship battles and all of the other finals occurring later within the year. And it's no different on horse racing, apart from the structure obviously is a little bit different, but it's quite pronounced in terms of the way that you expect the season to unfold. But that can have a significant impact on your trading, because if you think about it, if you're trading in peak season, then there'll be plenty of opportunities. The markets will be flush with money, and you should find them a little bit easier. But some of it depends upon your trading style. Some markets or things that you do will be suitable for flat or jumps. Some in running stuff will vary across the course of the year, and the type of markets that you expect to get will be very different as well. But let's have a look at the sort of thing that we expect to see. So the first thing that I'm going to show you here is the amount of prize money by week number. So running along the bottom of this graph, you've actually got all of the weeks of the year running from 1, and it runs until 52 because I'm counting it slightly differently to capture all of the activity that takes place. And then the number that you can see zigzagging across the screen is basically the amount of prize money rebased against the average over the course of the year. So if you look at January, you can see that the amount of prize money that is available within the market is relatively low, and there isn't huge amounts that takes place within January. Obviously there's a lot of racing on New Year's Day, but the problem that you have there is there's too much of it, and everybody will be hungover. Well, I say everybody, lots of people will be hungover. The markets can be pretty weak on New Year's Day, but that sort of ends a spell around Christmas week, where there's a lot of activity and things going on within the market that can be quite interesting to trade. But as soon as we fall out of that period and into the first week of the year, things are pretty quiet. Now, as we move along the graph, you can actually see that there's a huge spike at around sort of week 10ish or around that area, and that is Cheltenham. So you can see that at the end of January we have the Cheltenham trials, but then in the middle of March we get to Cheltenham, so there's a huge spike that occurs there. But as fast as that spike occurs, it declines again. So you sort of gradually build up as you go through the year. You reach Cheltenham where there's a lot of money within the market, and then you sort of fall out of that on the other side. But then we start to transition into the season proper, or the flat season. So around, as we head into April, the mix of things begins to change a little bit. So towards the end of April we have the flat racing restarting, and at the beginning of April we have the Aintree Grand National meeting. So you can see the prize money starts to lift up a little bit, and then as soon as we go out of April we get Guineas meeting at Newmarket. You get various other meetings taking place. So things begin to sort of pick up from there. And then as we go into June, you get the Derby, then you get Royal Ascot, and then you can see everything begins to build up. So as we approach the middle of the year, that's when there's loads and loads of action on all of the time, and the prize money is at its greatest. And then you can see that it maintains quite a decent level before falling away as we head towards the back end of the year. So you can see that actually it forms like an arc over the course of the year, where it's relatively low at the beginning of the year, relatively low at the end, and then peaks around the middle. What are the implications for you as a trader? Well, for me, obviously the more markets that are on and the more money in those markets driving more liquidity is where you tend to make more money. So I tend to find that in the winter I will do much worse than I do in the summer. Or am I doing better in the summer than I am in the winter? Half half empty, half full sort of moment. But I typically expect to do a lot better in the summer. And I know that in the winter, there's no way that I can reach those numbers. It's very unlikely to happen. Not impossible, nothing's impossible, but it's unlikely that that would happen. So my expectations come right down. I don't have unrealistic targets. And in fact, what I may do in the winter is I may take a day or two off. There may be moments where I just don't trade on some days when it's very weak and perhaps there's only 2 meetings on the card. I think my time may be used better elsewhere. But also think about it. If you trade football, for example, there's nothing in the summer apart from when it's a World Cup or a European Championship year or there's an international tournament going on. But there's plenty in the winter. So in fact, it's not impossible that you can start to fit your schedule around what you want to do. Now, if you really wanted to, you could just trade enormous levels of sport consistently throughout the year. And if you move into the southern hemisphere for sports trading, then obviously this graph sort of flips itself around. You end up getting the peak times at different times of the year. So, what I'm talking about specifically here is UK horse racing that we're looking at. But obviously, if we start to overlay all of the other sports onto it, then things change around a bit. In fact, it's probably not impossible for me to bring up a graph of all the sports by month to show you where the peaks are. But specifically what I'm trying to do in this video is to say to you, in the winter, especially sort of as we head towards the back end of the year, it can be tough. Don't set your expectations to be ridiculously high because you won't be able to achieve them. Whereas in the summer, you're going to have so many opportunities, it's going to seem unreal. The first winter I went through on UK racing, I began to doubt my own ability. I began to wonder if I'd lost my edge somewhat. But in fact, you begin to realise after time it's just part of that continuous cycle. If you can do well at this time of year, you're going to do fantastic in the summer. And if you're not doing so well at this time of the year, it's not too much to worry about, really. You sort of, as you enter the new year, you start looking towards Cheltenham and the uptick in that particular cycle. But you can see there are many peaks and troughs along the way, and some of them can be quite extreme. So this often catches people out. You flip from one really good week to one that's below average. And that can be a little bit frustrating, but it's perfectly normal types of activity. So yeah, hopefully that can give you a view of what it looks like over the course of the year. But the other thing that you need to look at is the type of racing that takes place. So if we look at jumps racing takes place pretty much continuously throughout the year, but there is much less of it in the summer. If you look at the blue line on this chart that is behind me, you can see that the jumps racing, you've got an average number of about sort of 60 meetings at the beginning of the year. That declines during the peak of summer, especially as we head towards the back end of summer, but then it starts to re-enter the card properly in around October time and then sort of builds from there. On the flat turf season, then you generally don't get much racing at all. Well, you don't get any actually in the winter because obviously the ground is just not suitable. So that really only tends to come online in around March, builds significantly through April, and then of course we get the evening racing starts to come online towards the back end of April, and then as we move into May we've got loads of racing in the afternoon and the evening, and then that follows the summer basically, and as we exit the summer and head out of that period, then it starts to decline away. You get a few races taking place in November if the conditions are good enough, and then you get nothing as you head into December and January and February because we're deep into winter then. So, if your style is suitable for one type of a market or another, then that will obviously be a significant factor for you in terms of the types of meetings that are taking place over the course of the year. All weather racing takes place over the year, but predominantly is a winter activity. There's significantly less in the summer and significantly more in the winter. And the all-weather courses trade very differently from typical flat turf courses. But again, some of that depends upon the type of racing that's taking place. But you can see how that would impact your trading as well. But there's an important message in here in terms of system development and automation as well, because if you don't change the style of what you're doing, whether it's betting, trading, whether you're doing something automated or manual, this level of seasonality is going to affect the outcome of all of those results. So as a consequence, you need to take that into account to try and find a strategy that fits perfectly as we move through all of these transitions through the year. Is incredibly hard to do. So the recommendation that I make to you is that it's much better to have strategies that suit those individual markets, suit the different styles and characteristics that you see within those markets. And that will allow you to maximize all of the potential that you see throughout the year. But also don't forget that, the favourability of the markets, the quality of the racing and all of those other things vary over the year. So don't set your expectations at a level that will force your hand, except that at certain times of the year, depending upon your style and what markets you choose to do them in, you're just going to get lower results, and there's not much that you can do about it. It's just that the quality, the type of racing that you want, and the quality of the race in those specific individual markets just isn't there. So you've got to set your expectations a little bit lower. What I tend to do, I spend more time doing other things. I tend to find that winter is time for me to catch up on stuff, embark on new projects, analyse data and do all of those things, and not worry too much about my overall results. I'll still be actively trading the big markets and doing as much as I can, but I'm pretty relaxed about missing the odd thing here and there because it's not going to have much impact on me over the course of the year. So yeah, I hope that's been useful for you.